Hi everyone, welcome to week 4, Contemporary Art and Gender. I've moved my desk around so you've got some more things to look at rather than just the magnolia walls. And what I'm going to do today is to just talk through some of the issues that might be worth considering when we're thinking about contemporary art through the framework of gender. Now, what you'll remember is what we're doing at the moment is looking at contemporary art and thinking about the different ways that contemporary art can be understood through a variety of thematics. So our theme today is gender, and we're going to try and use gender, I guess, a bit like a lens. So it's as if we're putting a different lens in front of our glasses and we're seeing what kinds of things we see if we use this lens. Before I get started on that, I just wanted to remind you that there is a completely non-compulsory CAVA331 virtual Facebook group. You don't have to be a member of Facebook to look at the group, I don't think. And what I'm doing is I'm just posting all of the virtual walkthroughs that I come across directly to the site so that you can access them. It's me being a little bit lazy because it's easy for me to do, but it also means you just have direct access to the web links and things. So the first thing that's up there today is Once in a Lifetime Raphael show. Now, most of you will know that Raphael is not contemporary art, but the exhibition itself is an example of contemporary exhibition making. And it had been, people have been talking about this exhibition being put together for the past 10 years, and it opened and then closed after 4 days. So it's kind of an exhibition that is relevant to our contemporary moment, even though the art inside it is clearly not contemporary art. Other sites that I've been sending you are sites like the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra, who are working on this project called #Museum from Home, getting people to think about objects that are in the museum. And this is really useful and relevant for us and the way that we're thinking and the way that we are working. Also, other galleries are listing works and artists who work online. Olia Leonina was one of the first artists to make networked art inside the network in the late 90s. And so she's having a bit of a revival at the moment, of course, because networked art is one of the few art forms that can actually continue uninterrupted at the moment. So anyway, if you're interested, just join the CAVA331 virtual. Any links that I think are incredibly important, I will cross over to the Moodle page. But for me at the moment, it's easier to just put them up on Facebook. And of course, if you find any links or anything, just make sure that you add them to the Facebook pages as well, or to the Moodle. Hopefully the Moodle is working well for you now. We're just in the process of still working with IT to divide the groups up for the tutorials. You're going to be put in a smaller tutorial group, so you will have noticed and maybe received some changes. We're making the tutorial groups about groups of 10 to 12 so that it's going to be easier. Hopefully people's Zoom won't crash as much. It will be easier to participate in the Zoom tutorials this way. Also, please don't panic if your network is not up to it. Just do your best to attend the Zoom tutorial when I send you through the time that your tutorial will be on Thursday. If you can't, Eva's working really hard to prepare worksheets that are kind of guided conversations through the tutorial. And please get in touch with either of us if this isn't working for you, and we'll work out another system and another means. We really recognise that working in this online environment is challenging and difficult for everyone. Just to give you an example, I uploaded a 15-minute intro changeover lecture yesterday, and it took me 6.5 hours to do it. And I know how to do these things. So it's kind of, the technology is not faster, it is much slower. And we would love to be there with you, but we can't be. So we're just trying to work out different ways that we can all access this content and all these amazing things that we want to talk with about this session. Okay. So thinking about contemporary art and gender. And some of you might be going, this is just not relevant. It's the contemporary age. Feminism has happened. It's done, it's over. It's time to move on. We've got other things to deal with right now. Why on earth would we be thinking about gender? What I want you to think about today is the way that questions of gender have not gone away, and the way that questions of gender actually help us frame and consider some of the very real issues that are happening in the world today. So I just want to start with some questions for you. Does contemporary art have a gender? Is it something that you pay attention to when you visit an art gallery? Do you wonder about the gender of the artist? Do you think, oh, okay, so this is a woman, so this is how this is working for them? This is someone who doesn't identify as either male or female. This is their way of dealing with the world right now. What does that mean for how the world deals with them? How does art reflect the kinds of social and cultural constructions of gender that we have? Or for some of you, you may still think that it is simply the quality of the creative expression that matters the most. And I guess what I want you to think about today is actually how that may be a flawed position. And I've got a clear way that I want to approach this, and that is through the data, because data is what matters these days. Okay, and we'll deal with contemporary data because it's the contemporary world. So in 2012, and if we were in a lecture theatre, I'd be asking you this question out loud. How many female artists featured in the top 100 auction sales worldwide? So auction sales are a marker not just of contemporary art, but a marker of how art is being received and valued around the world at the moment. So we've got 100 top auction sales, and we think about how many women there are, and yep, you worked out the answer, I'm sure. So that was 2012, that was 10 years ago. The world has changed quite a lot since then, so things will be looking better, right? So in 2017, 5 years later, how many female artists featured in the top 100 auction sales worldwide? We're in the contemporary world. We know, okay, there was a problem. Women artists, female artists are not featuring in the auction sales. It's time to change it. So 2017, things are looking a hell of a lot better. And we have one. And that was Louise Bourgeois' Spider, a work that's very familiar to you now. It came in at 93. So she just scrapped her. Now, I haven't done the sums yet for 2020. They won't be out for a while, but we're talking another 5 years, another 3 years down the track. And, maybe we'll have 2 women in the top 100. So should it matter is the question that we're thinking about. Should it matter if more men than women are shown in art galleries all over the world? Should it matter that out of the top 100 there is 1 woman? Is it just that men and women are better at different things? That, men are better art? These are the questions that I want you to be thinking about and thinking, well, why is it like this? Why does even contemporary art continue to replicate these histories that we know are somewhat flawed? So, as I said, rather than thinking this through sort of a sense that this is a particular politics that I'm trying to get you to think about, I want you to address it by thinking about a particular set of data. And of course, data is political. In Australia, we've got this fantastic thing called the Countess Report. And you're going to look at this a bit in tutorials today, so I'm not going to go over it too much. But the Countess report is a very careful process of data collection of all of the art world in Australia at the moment. So the percentage of women who are visual arts graduates, the percentage of women who are then shown in galleries, the percentage of women who receive prizes, get major museum exhibitions, are reviewed in newspapers and art journals. So and the Countess is really very much about women counting what's there, look at the numbers, and then seeing if things change. And it's had quite a big impact on the major galleries in Australia. So things are changing as a result of it. Now, this is contemporary. We have to go back in time a little bit to see how this question has been asked previously. And the article that continues to influence us today when we think about why has there only been one woman in the top 100 auction sales in the past 10 years, is to go back to Linda Nocklin's article, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists? Now, the article is much more complicated than it seems. She says essentially that there haven't been great women artists because the system of art prevents this from happening. Now, that's again something that some of you might be rolling your eyes about. So let's actually look at the details of her argument and see how the art system itself perpetrates this idea that women are not great at art. Well, clearly they're not, because they're not in the top 100 of auction sales. This is the very last paragraph of her article. The question, why have there been no great women artists, has led us to the conclusion so far that art is not a free, autonomous activity of a super endowed individual. By that, she's talking about the myth of genius. But rather, the total situation of art making, both in terms of the development of the art maker and the nature and quality of the work of art itself, occur in a social situation. So, be they art academies, systems of patronage, mythologies of the divine creator, artist as He-Man, or social outcast, all of these things contribute to this idea that actually women are unable to enter into this social structure, which is the social structure of art production. She gives some very clear examples of this. Here's a work from 500 years ago by a female artist called Sophonisba Anguissola. And Sophonisba has painted herself being painted by her teacher. So what we have here is an example of her awareness that women are more likely to be in the gallery if they are an image than if they are the artist themselves. So in order to get her own work into the gallery, in many ways she hands her work back to her teacher and shows herself being painted by her teacher. It's a very strange and very self-aware kind of cycle in which artist becomes image, becomes artist. So this is Anguissola showing us how the circuits of the art world operate. The same story is, of course, told by Barbara Kruger in her work that I'm sure is familiar to many of you, Your Gaze Hits the Side of My Face. Kruger is also talking about the fact that for women to be present in the art world, they are often present as an image. And what she does with this text work is bring together the image with the text and actually say, yeah, but you might be looking at me, but I have some autonomy. I have some agency now. Your gaze just hits the side of my face. And I'm going to start to reclaim my image and to potentially look back. So the kinds of things that Nochlin is talking about in her article are things that continue today. And the key, she has, let's say, two main points. The first is that there have been no great women artists because of disabling social circumstances. So the broader structures of society have prevented women from entering into an outworld frame that is also defined in a particular way. Now, some of you will be thinking, but what about Frida Kahlo? Or what about another woman artist who you can name off the top of your head? The point is that they are one of the 100. So we're not looking at a societal system that says this is the way that art occurs. Generally, we're looking at exceptions. We're looking at women who have made it inside the art world system, but have done it by perhaps adapting some of the rules of the art world system. And perhaps it's the art world system that actually needs to be questioned and changed. And again, I want to take you back in time. So when the Royal Academy in London was opened, strangely enough, two women were admitted, Mary Moser and Angelica Kauffman. Now, Moser and Kauffman were considered equals in terms of their artistic practice, in terms of the work that they did, except that when this portrait was painted by Zoffany of all of the members of the Royal Academy, you will notice that they are present, but only as portraits on the wall. And the reason for this is that there are two models, male models in the room, and it was considered inappropriate for them to be in the presence of naked men. It was also considered inappropriate for them to do any form of life drawing. So although they were recognised as artists, they remain in the records as images, the way that the female body should be present in the gallery, according to the Academy in the 18th century. And I guess what I want you to think about is, does this idea continue through to today in contemporary art? The second point that Nochlin makes is that the whole thrust of what we mean by greatness suggests a particular kind of art, a particular kind of art production, and also a particular function for art to have in society. Now, the key person who is sort of held up to maintain this mythology is, of course, Jackson Pollock, the misunderstood genius, the individual who went out on his own and strived and changed the art world. Now, this is a mythology of the genius from modernism, and we would anticipate that perhaps one of the key markers between modern thinking through modernism and thinking through contemporary art is actually a break and a shift in terms of this notion of the genius. And I guess I'll leave that for you to think through yourself. Has this idea of the artist as genius run its time, run its course? And actually, when we're thinking and looking at contemporary art, are we thinking of a different kind of art, a different kind of production, and a different kind of function? Have those three things changed enough that when we talk and think about contemporary art, we're thinking about gender in quite a different way? I'll put a link to that video that I just flicked through because I don't think it's going to play, which is an excerpt from the famous Life magazine video interview with Pollock that plays through a number of these ideas. And essentially what it does is it creates the sense of a hero myth. Pollock, with a misunderstood childhood, an early career that wasn't going anywhere, a muse, Lee Krasner, who saved him and supported him, a critic who introduced him to the art world. He becomes institutional, but then he is threatened by his peers and we have this whole story of the hero myth, which is essentially what we're being told is the way to operate in the art world at the moment. So where have we got to? We've got to a point where we understand the history of what it has meant to be, to think about gender in relation to art, and we've looked at that kind of across time, and we've sort of got to the end of modernity, and we're at this point where we're thinking about contemporary art, and contemporary art has hopefully got to a point where thinking about gender means thinking about something a little bit different. So let's play that same game again, the game of looking at the data. Because to make any of these kinds of arguments to say that contemporary art is different, contemporary art has changed, we need to kind of have a sense that it has. And the best way to have a sense that it has is by counting things in the art gallery. So this is a artwork campaign data collection activity taken by the Guerrilla Girls, an anonymous collective of artists who survey, like the Countess, survey galleries and museums around the world. In 1988, they did this massive poster campaign called "Do Women Have to Be Naked to Get into the Metropolitan Museum?" And they discovered that less than 5% of the artists in the modern art section were women, but 85% of the nudes were. So you would assume from this that yes, women had to be naked to get into the Metropolitan Museum. They redid the survey in 2011, and the results were not dramatically different, although you will notice that the percentage of women has actually gone down, both in terms of nude and in terms of practicing artists. So the question becomes one of thinking about what and how the art world looks for and valorizes and asks for particular kinds of art, particular forms of operation, and particular questions that are in some ways considered to be separate to gender, except of course are completely entangled within questions of gender. So let's just think about, I'm going to stop this lecture now because my timer's gone off and that's about as much as I can upload. So if we were going to challenge these things that I've already presented to you, how would we challenge that from a contemporary perspective? One would be to be political, to enact a particular kind of feminist politics. Another would be to be utopian, to kind of challenge the status quo and say, actually, we can work towards this different future. Another would be to bring gender to current issues and current questions. Another is to actually question representation, which is the question of, do women have to be naked to get into the museum? What kinds of representation do we want going forward in terms of contemporary art? And then the last one is to question the boundaries and structures of the contemporary art world at the moment. And the two structures that control how the contemporary art world works still remain neoliberalism and globalization. And so what we might have to do is to think about what are the ways that we can question these societal structures in order to challenge representation and challenge who or what gets into the art gallery. So I'm going to stop part one here and I'll see you in a minute